So thanks for showing up today, obviously, for this presentation. So we are going to look at the reactive ground presentation just because we are starting to experience reactive ground, and we've gotten a notification from the geologists that they've discovered material that is reactive. And it is our responsibility to make sure that we have a good understanding before we head down to the pit. So I'll go straight into this presentation so that we know what reactive ground is. So today's learning objectives is we should be able to understand what reactive ground is and why it's hazardous, and be able to identify the WHS legislations on handling reactive grounds. So for an extension of that, any other industry standards that we need to follow to make sure that we are handling reactive grounds appropriately. And then we need, at the end of the lesson, we need to also learn the risk management procedures of managing reactive grounds and understanding how to use temperature logging tools to be able to measure the ground temperatures and identify those that have been deemed reactive. And finally, we should be able to recognize safe handling and emergency responses when loading and dealing with reactive ground. So moving straight into the next slide. So the reactive ground contains sulfide minerals that generate heat and acid when exposed to oxygen or nitrates. Have any one of you walked into a blast hole and seen some gas or moisture come out of the blast hole? So that's good because it means that you probably haven't experienced the reactive ground. But as you can see from this photo, this particular blast hole is emitting fume, which is in this case yellow in color, but sometimes the fume is not necessarily colored, so it could be uncolored gas. So you have to use the sense of smell to be able to identify that there's a gas that is not normal that is coming out. So the hazards for reactive ground is rapid heat generation, which is introducing a risk of explosion, considering that we are dealing with explosives. This is why this is very important for us, because there's that risk of explosion. And then later on I'll show you a case study of an explosion that was associated with reactive ground. And then we've got the formation of acid leachates, which cause an environmental hazard and a health hazard. So if you touch those acidic effluents, you'll get burns and you'll get your clothes or shoes destroyed, and that's not good. And if that's not controlled properly and it seeps into waterways, that affects the environment greatly as well. And so then, as an example, sulfidic rocks will react to nitrates to cause a rapid heat production, which is called exothermic in chemistry. Alternatively, you can have sulfidic rocks react to oxygens to form acidic leachates or runoff, which is what I was talking about just a while ago. And then just to integrate with the WHS mines regulation, Regulation 631D requires us to manage risks related to explosives and reactive ground. Moving on. So this is the case study that I was telling you about. So it happened at an Anglo-American mine site. So at 7 in the morning, the shore firers has rocked up and discovered ejection from hole 17. And then he's observed that there was steam and there was smoke and white and yellow substances around the collar of the hole that was loaded in the previous day. So the shore firer has gone ahead and cleared the blast area, and then later on an inspection team of 5 personnel, including the shore firer, has gone down to inspect the hole. And at 8 or 9, all 17 are partially detonated, with the people still there. And so then the 5 personnel near all 17 suffered injuries and were evacuated. So this is real, this happens, and it introduces real risks for our workplace. So this is why it's important for us to be aware and manage it accordingly. So the importance of identifying the reactive ground include: it reduces the risk of unplanned detonations. So as we've said, we are dealing with explosions and explosives, and the explosives can be detonated by presence of heat. And it protects personnel from the exposure to hazardous fumes and extreme temperatures. So in an event where it's not exploding, you can still have people affected by the fumes. So if we can identify these, it allows us an opportunity to use proper protective equipment to be able to manage those risks. And then it also helps us, this also helps us adhere to the WHS 9 regulations, as we have mentioned before. It also helps us in planning safe and efficient drone blast activities. Moving forward, so we've gone through the importance. How do we identify the reactive ground? So the common locations would be carbonaceous shells, black shells, fresh rock at the contact zones between shell and mineralized ore. So in many cases, the geologist will do tests, and if a pit is categorized as a reactive ground, they will let us know. But this is not always the case. So this is why sometimes you have to use the visual indicators. So the visual indicators include dark colored rock formations, moisture seepage or discoloration, and sulfurous or burning smell. Now I've got a diagram there that shows like different levels of material. So the top layer is an oxidized, transitional, and fresh. So the lower you go, you have higher risk of having reactive ground when you deal with carbonaceous shells or black shells. And then, so now we understand how to identify the reactive ground. So how do we mitigate it? So we've identified a reactive ground, and the best way of us managing or mitigating issues related to blasting with reactive ground is by temperature probing. So we use an instrument like this one on the screen, which is a thermocouple logger, to measure hole temperatures, and this equipment allows you to measure different temperatures as you pull up the probe, and it will give you an average of the highest reading on the hole and the minimum reading of the hole. So that allows you to sort of like have a good understanding of the hottest sections and the least hot sections. So logging of every blast hole is a requirement in all mining areas where there is heat affected or reactive grounds, and this is consistent with our SWP on handling reactive grounds. And the routine temperature logging requires an initial screen of the temperature of all holes in the shots. So you have to measure all the holes in the shots and have a temperature, and then start probing those reactive holes and measure the minimum and maximum temperatures. And this would be ideal within 12 hours before loading explosives, but also during the QA and QC stage after drilling. So the most important thing for us to know is like anything below 50 degrees is safe to load. It's not considered as a reactive hole. Anything above 50 will be not loaded, and anything above 30, I have not indicated there, will be like, that is like the sort of threshold of like going to change the product type that you're loading. But anything over 50 you do not load at all. And as I've mentioned, this is consistent with our charging blast holes in reactive grounds SWP. So we've measured the temperatures and we've identified those holes and isolated them. Now, safe handling and explosives considerations. So as I've mentioned, you can load all the holes that are below 50, but we all know that like different products will behave differently at different temperature ranges. So as first considerations, for those holes that have been deemed reactive, we still have to maintain like a high level of personal protective equipment awareness. So using fire resistance gloves, safety glasses, and using face shields. But also we have to place empty buffer holes between hot zones and explosive charges. And we have to also manage the sleep times accordingly. And this again is in line with the WHS regulation 631D, managing risks related to explosives and reactive energy. Now again, as during loading, we should pre-prime no more than 25 holes. This allows us to sort of tie it in and blast it if we had to. So you do not want to like have reactive ground and need to blast and you have like holes that are already planned. So, and we use any rich products that are stable. And then we have to sequence the loading planning from the IP just to allow us to sort of fire the shot if we had to do that. And then the most important one, you're not allowed to patch the auger on the hose on the bench. This is obviously because the reactive ground will be reacting with the product on the bench. And if you overload any hole, you have to siphon it out. So we are not allowed to overload, and if for some reason you put product and it's disappeared and it's not getting to the kilos, you have to stop. You have to stop. And all the holes have to be stemmed. So in case of an emergency, so as we've mentioned, a hole exceeding 50 you do not load, and you stem the hole immediately and adjust loading plan for surrounding holes, just to make sure that if by any chance for the surrounding holes you overloaded it, you just take it out and just make sure that you've managed that effectively. And the emergency response plan includes immediate evacuation procedures and fire suppression strategies and fire aid and emergency medical response. So we know our emergency channels. When we are loading, obviously, this kind of shots, we have to make sure that we plan ahead and everybody is aware that that's a situation that is going on. And this is consistent with regulation 4243, which is the first aid and emergency plans. And so the summary is we've discussed on what reactive ground is and how it presents high risks in mining areas. And then we've gone through the temperature probing. Anything that is above 50 we do not load, we stem it. And then we follow the WHS regulations. 631D is on loading reactive shots, and the other ones are also for emergencies. And ensuring training compliance for the workers, exactly what we are doing today. And with that, any questions?
No, George, that seems all pretty much straightforward to us.
Yeah.
Yep. Don't load anything above 50.
Yeah, don't load anything above 50. And what do you do with the probe? You record?
Record all the holes, temperatures.
Yes.
Yep. After QAing.
Yes.
Yep.
Cool. Thank you. And you guys
Thanks,
are now
George.
competent on loading holes on like reactive grounds.
Oh.
Thank you.
Oh, mate. Did you see me go cross-eyed?
Oh my god. Oh god.